Welcome to the second part of our small series on creating and managing group reservations in Protel. Today I'm going to show you how to create a joint account for the group and use it to administer all the group's revenues easily and reliably. Group reservations are a good idea whenever you want to edit data for several reservations at once, or whenever you reserve several rooms that are going to be built together. The best way to reserve several rooms at once is to use the room type plan. By the way, if you are not familiar with the room type plan, you should first see the tutorial on reserving rooms using the room type plan. Now let's set the stage for today's tutorial. Mrs. Sandra Silk is on the phone. Her company, Blue Limited, is sending her and 2 other employees to a training course in our town. And now she wants to reserve 3 standard twin rooms from the 5th to the 8th of February 2008. First, I open the room type plan by pressing the F2 function key. I increase the default number of standard twin rooms to 3. Then I use the mouse to drag the reservations out over the desired time frame. Then press Enter to open the reservation dialog. When entering group reservations, we should always enter the group's name first. It's a good idea to pick a name that contains an abbreviated customer name and the arrival date. Our group is arriving on the 5th of February for Blue Limited, so we'll call the group Blue 050208. Once I exit the field, Protel searches our database and tells us that no data records were found for this name. So I click Yes to have Protel create a new profile and immediately display it. Now you already know what a guest profile is. However, this profile is something different. Its sole purpose is to link together the reservations of our 3 group members so we can manage their data and balance their accounts centrally. That's why we call it Group Master. Group Masters are only used one time, and so once all the group's liabilities have been settled, the Group Master is no longer needed. That's why we tell Protel to delete the Group Master as soon as possible, simply by placing a check mark in front of Delete Profile as soon as possible. From now on, the Group Master will control every aspect of managing the group at our hotel. We will be seeing it again soon, in other words. For now, though, let's click OK to return to the reservation dialog. Do you see? Protel has entered the group's name in the name field. Next, we enter the name of the company who will receive the bill for the group. Once again, as soon as I exit the field, Protel searches our database and tells us that no data records were found for this company. I click Yes to have Protel create a new profile. First, let's enter Blue Limited's contact persons in the company profile. To do this, I click the button with the 3 dots in the contact res row. Mrs. Sandra Silk is responsible for both the reservations and the invoice, and so I check the line contact persons for invoices and reservations are identical. I quickly choose the correct salutation that will be used in all future correspondence, such as invoices. I then click OK to confirm the contact person's information, and Protel adds the data to the company profile. Now let's add the email address where we can contact Mrs. Silk. I simply click the right-hand section of the dialog on Communication Methods and enter silk@blue.com in the email line and click OK to confirm. Now that's enough for now. I click OK to close the company profile and return to the reservation dialog, where Protel has added the contact person's information. Now we can enter more details on our reservations in the lower portion of the window. Let's focus on a few key pieces of information, such as the market and the source. Note that here, like in many other areas of protel, each hotel can decide for itself which fields are mandatory and have to be completed. To finish, I click OK to confirm my entries and close out the reservation. Now, protel asks whether we want to generate a group master invoice. If I were to say no, protel would not create a group master account. I could still edit the group's reservations together, but I could not manage the group revenues centrally. In that case, protel would issue individual invoices for each of the 4 members of the group. Well, since Blue Limited is paying for its employees' expenses, we want everything to be billed to one account, and so I click Yes. protel then creates one account for the group master, in addition to the accounts for each individual group member. Now I'm going to show you how to manage our group's revenues by entering routing instructions in the Routing Instructions dialog shown here. In this dialog, we decide what revenues are billed to which account, for which guest, and when or for how long these instructions will apply. First, let me remind you that whichever routing instruction we enter for the group master will be applied to the individual reservations linked by the master. I'll show you how to customize this inheritance process later on. Of course, you can also change the routing instructions for each individual reservations afterward. As you can see, protel shows us a list of invoices from A to F in the bottom portion of the window. Invoice A is assigned to the group master by default. The recipient of invoice B is Blue Limited. In a moment, we'll be transferring our group's revenues to this recipient. But first, we quickly change the method of payment. Mrs. Silk has already told us that the company is not paying cash for the rooms, but wants to be billed later. I click the Method of Payment button to open the Select Method of Payment dialog. Select to Sales Ledger. So, how do we manage our guest's account? Well, it all depends on what our customer wants. Blue Limited is generous. Not only is it paying for the accommodation, but it's also paying for food and beverage. It is not, however, paying for the extras that our trainees buy while staying at our hotel. Now, this is a pretty common scenario, which is why it's also included in our frequently used instruction list. I select Accommodation and F&B to be invoice of Group Master. And protel shows the selected routing instruction in the upper portion of the window. And by the way, we can also set up our own customized routing instructions. However, we don't have enough time to do this in today's tutorial. So I click OK to confirm my selection. This is where we decide who is affected by the chosen action, which in this case is the execution of the selected routing instruction. In this case, as in most cases, I will click the button to select group members and master. Why? protel will then apply the selected routing instruction to each guest account and to the group master account. That means all accommodation and F&B revenues are billed to invoice B, while everything else is billed to invoice A. All the revenues originally billed to the B invoices of each individual group member will be transferred to the group master's B invoice, and that means these revenues will be billed to the company. Likewise, all the revenues that are not for accommodation and F&B will remain on the individual guests' accounts and will appear on their personal invoices. Thus, I click the button to select Group Members and Master. And this was the final step in setting up our group reservation. So, our group is ready for now. However, we've got a lot of other things to do. Join me in one of the other tutorials to learn how Protel can help you with all your work, like performing the end-of-day process. Thank you for having me joined today.